Now I'm going to create some in-between frames for my animation. These will be states of transformation in between the werewolf and the human. Now I've saved myself some time by compositing these two images together, so there's pieces from the werewolf and pieces from the human, and I just kind of mixed them together. Then I'll go ahead and just start painting on that to add more detail to it. I did some liquify transformations in Photoshop, but that wasn't quite good enough, so I'll need to go ahead and add some custom paint to this as well. For example, I want to make the eyebrows thicker. I want to make the hair thicker all around on the face. I want the mouth to gradually move into the mouth shape from the werewolf, and for the teeth to get longer. I'm going to also shorten the head a bit by distorting it. That way it starts to morph into the head shape that I have for the werewolf. If I want, I can save as a PSD and bring all of those images into Photoshop, and I can do before and afters to be able to see how this transformation is coming together. By doing that, I'll see areas that I need to fix, and then I can save as a PSD, go back into Painter, and make those changes. So what I'm looking for is a balance of similarity from the previous frame to the next frame, with enough changes that kind of blend the transformations together. So if the mouth is getting bigger, then it starts to get gradually bigger with the in-between frames. The final version of the werewolf has black lips, so I'll start to tint the lips in the in-between frames. I'll start to make the ears point out a little bit. I'll start to have the eyes begin to glow, and that'll help this start to transition into the next frame. Doing the befores and afters just really helps me see that transition. Now I want to go to the final version of the wolf, and I just want to pull down the eyebrows and kind of change the mouth, and I want the werewolf to look meaner because that's just really been bothering me. He looked like a happy werewolf. He looked like Scooby-Doo, and it just really wasn't working for me, so if I want it to look like a mean werewolf, we're going to have to make it look mean. I think changing the eyes really made a huge difference, and now I'm much more happy with the version of this werewolf. Now I'll go back and do some more work on one of the in-between frames. I want that to start to look meaner as well. And I will be a little bit sloppy here because I know that I can go in and correct things. I'm really just kind of trying to compose this as I go along, so I don't know exactly how I want it to look. So I'm not going to worry about the fangs being absolutely perfect because I can fix those later. I'm focusing more on the length of the fangs and how they start to transition into the final phase of the werewolf. I'll do a bit more work on the mouth and on the eyes until I'm more happy with how this intermediate frame is looking. Then I can move on to another frame. I've gone back to the layered version of my human state, and I want to tweak that a little bit and make that look just a bit meaner too. I'll tweak a few other things here and there just so I'm more happy with how this looks. Really, the two most important frames are this frame and the very last frame because those are going to be shown the longest. The in-between frames are only going to be shown briefly, so I don't need to worry about those being absolutely perfect. So I'm just going to continue cleaning up these in-between frames, just adding detail and basically just repeating what I've been doing. Working on all of these images simultaneously and bouncing between them is really helping me make sure that these stay consistent. Now I'm going to preview my animation just by bringing each of these images into Photoshop, and I'll just use Control-Tab to cycle between each document just to get a quick preview of that transition. I think I'm pretty happy with how this is coming along, but there are a few spots that I want to kind of smooth out. To make this easier to work on, I'm going to go to each of these individual documents and I'm going to group the layers together. That way I can import these into a single document, and then I can work on each of the images together in one painting rather than having to switch between individual documents. I'll bring that image back into Painter, and now I can go through and just hide some of those layers because I don't want them all to be showing. I just want to show the layer that I'm working on. And I'll just clean up the teeth and just make those more detailed. And then it makes it really easy just to go in between all of these different frames and make edits to them all at the same time. I'm going to go back to Photoshop and I'm just going to check my transition between this first state and the second state. That's looking pretty good. One thing I do notice is that I need to add that iris blur that I created earlier. I'll check some of my other transitions as well, just to kind of see how this is progressing through those frames and look at what some of the changes I might want to make could be. I want to make sure that if I'm creating extra layers, I also stay on top of naming those layers so it doesn't get confusing since I have a lot of layers and groups going on here. Let's go back into Painter and let's do some more work on that mouth. I don't want the mouth to be too sloppy, so I'm going to go ahead and just maybe copy this mouth from the final werewolf, paste it in on one of the intermediate frames, and then just kind of adjust it to get it to fit. I can just transform it and erase it a bit, and I can get it to look like it fits right into that painting. I'll go ahead and preview my transitions again and just make a few small tweaks here and there, going back and forth between the individual frames and just modifying a few little things, trying to get it all consistent and looking nice. Then I can start working on making a more proper frame animation here in Photoshop. I'm in the timeline, I created a frame animation, and I'm just going to hide all of those layers and groups, and I'm just going to show them one by one. So on this first frame, I want to show my first state, my human state. I'll create a new frame, I'll show the second state, create a new frame, show the third state, and so on. I'll hold Shift to select all 4 of those states, and I'll set the timing, and I can just play through that. And this lets me preview my animation. Now you could do a very simple animation like this in Photoshop, or we can make it a little bit more advanced in Premiere Pro, which we'll look at how to do later. We may want to adjust the timing a bit so it's not so jumpy. And we may want to make some more in-between frames, so we need some more in-between states. So we can simply just duplicate some of these layers and just do like we did before, cut out some pieces of one version and paste them into the other, or use a layer mask like I'm doing here and just kind of mix them together. Then preview your transition and see if that in-between frame helped. Once you've blocked in some basic in-between frames, then you'll want to go ahead and save your document and bring it back into Painter and just kind of touch that up and make it look a little bit more polished. Then I can go back to Photoshop and just rebuild that frame animation and test my new frames. It's always nice to play it in the context of a GIF animation. That way you'll be able to see it just play back at a particular speed. I tweak the timing of the frames so they're not all the same duration. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to liquefy a bit and just help to kind of transition a bit more smoothly between these different shapes of the elements of the face. I think I'm pretty happy with all these frames, so I'm just going to go ahead and tidy up all of my layers and make sure each frame is grouped into its own group. And then I'll collapse those groups so that I have just one layer per frame. And then I can import this into Premiere Pro to do my final animation.